God becomes darkness to save us from the dark. God enters and becomes darkness to save us from the dark. That's the overarching theme that we have during Holy Week. Every single time we enter into this sacred time, we know that Jesus is preparing to give his life for us on the cross. And there's so many figures in the Passion story that we just heard that we can focus on, but I want to pay close attention to the figure of Judas, because I think Judas sometimes gets a bad rap, right? For all of human history, for thousands of years, Judas has been depicted as the betrayer of Jesus. And absolutely, Judas is the worst human being who's ever lived. Poets and playwrights, authors for centuries, people who have done artistic renditions have always placed Judas in hell as the worst of the sinners, right? We heard in the gospel how Judas hung himself in despair. And yet, if we look deeper at the reality here, the church never condemns anyone. In fact, the church never says that Judas is in fact in hell, right? The church always says that there are canonized saints, men and women who are in heaven. But the church never in the human history has said anyone is in hell, including Judas. So what's the rationale behind this, right? Why do we not say that even the worst of the worst sinners, like Judas, would not end up in hell? Well, precisely for this reason, because Jesus himself became darkness. God became darkness in Jesus to save even the worst of sinners who are despairing in darkness. You think about that for a moment, right? Judas, in despair, hung himself. And a little more than a few hours later, Jesus was hanging on the cross to save all of us, including the worst of sinners, including even Judas. Jesus hung on the cross to save even the ones who hang themselves. If you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, many people misunderstand the fact that if people are so distraught, so despairing, that if they take their own life, people believe that somehow that person is condemned, that they're absolutely going to hell. But the church has never taught that. In fact, in the Catechism, it says just the opposite, that those who are in such a horrifically despairing state that they take their own life, as Judas did, it says in the Catechism, in those certain words, that God extends his grace, his salutary grace, all the more to people who are in such a place that they would end their own life. Is it not then possible and quite plausible that at the moment that Judas hung himself in despair, that there was a moment where Jesus appeared to him in that moment as he died and said, I love you. Come back to me, be healed, be forgiven. Why? Because it said that Judas regretted what he did, right? It said he regretted what he did and he tossed the silver back. God never completely closes the door on us, ever. There's always a crack that's left open. And perhaps in that moment when Judas took his own life, he didn't enter into hell, but he was given a hand of forgiveness and love. He saw our blessed Lord risen from the dead, forgiving him and healing him and restoring him back to his original dignity in life. God enters into our darkness. God becomes darkness so that we don't have to fear the dark anymore. This is the deep meaning of Jesus' passion, that even the most horrific worst of sinners, people in our families that we have written off and said, there's no way this person's ever going to be forgiven. There's no way this horrific sinner, this horrible person, they're absolutely in hell. God's justice and God's mercy is presented even to the worst of sinners at the moments of their death. Praise be to Jesus Christ, who became darkness for us. For as he hung upon the cross, he appeared in hope to even Judas as he hung himself, saying, I love you, I forgive you. How do we know this? Because Jesus said in the darkness of the Garden of Gethsemane, right? He cried out to the Father, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Lord, let this cup pass from me, for not my will but yours be done. Lord, why have you abandoned me? Right? These words, Jesus entered into spiritual and psychological darkness. Jesus knew he had to do this, but he felt every depth of human emotion that could ever be felt in that garden as he was being betrayed. He took that upon himself, and because of that, forgiveness and healing is possible, even for the worst and the most horrific of sinners. Jesus' love and mercy and God's justice come together during this Holy Week. I invite you to come back on Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Sunday to see the rest of the story.